Hi, and welcome to a special episode with Nathan and Kelly. We're going to talk about AI art and how much we love it and how it's probably a problem for us. And we're going to explore the contours of AI art specifically through the tool that many folks are familiar with. If you've been keeping up with this at all, it's called Midjourney, and it's really kind of caught on in the Discord world where it's mostly used. And I don't know about you, Kelly, but I kind of got wind of it just through a couple of friends and saw it initially, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like, seems like a fun little thing to try out, but I didn't really get it all that well. And when I did try it, it just didn't quite give me what I wanted, and I just moved on to something else. And then something happened. I don't know if it was another post in social media, maybe somebody we both may follow, who put something up there, and I was like, geez, this is actually really powerful. I should give this another try. And I jumped right back into it and really committed some time to kind of figuring out how it works. And ever since, I just really can't put it down. Feel like I have a problem. So anyway, I don't know about you, but what's been your experience? How did you kind of get into using it?
Yeah, the first image that I saw, or at least where I was aware of what I was looking at, was this really cool one that Tupacabra did.
Mm,
Um, he did one of the lady of,
yes.
or for people who study the UFO phenomenon. There's been a lot of talk, especially recently, about the connection between Marian apparitions and some sort of goddess divine type being that is appearing to people in various contact experiences. And it's become kind of a point of interest for me, and I know a bunch of other people. And he did this really cool one of it almost looks like it has like a very kind of Catholic imagery feel about it, but she's all in blue, even her face, and like her robes are billowing, and she's up in the sky. And there's something about it that I was just like, oh my god, like it's arresting, and
Yes.
like you said, I had tried some AI stuff before, and I thought it was cool, but I didn't have that feeling about it. But with Midjourney, I feel like everything that I've as I work with it, I just get more and more impressed with it. And there's something about it that's very like deep and archetypal and gritty, and that appeals to me. It doesn't just feel like imagery; it really does feel like art. And so I think that's
Mm,
what perked me up. I don't know if Midjourney were kind of the first people to get there, but it felt like there's this tipping point recently where AI has transitioned from being just kind of a fun thing to something that's really producing what looks and feels like art, which I know is something we'll talk about more. But that's just really, I'm really kind of enchanted by it.
oh man, for sure. And are you an artist in any other kind of mediums, or do art of any kind, or music, or is that something that you have a history with? Or
Not really. I used to be a classically trained singer, but I gave that up years
oh
ago.
wow.
Yeah, and I'm a writer. But other than that, definitely the visual arts are not a gift of mine.
Hmm.
And so in some ways, it's kind of amazing to feel. It gives me that feeling like I've done art, and I know
Hmm.
logically that I have not done art, but I feel like I have done art. And I'm
Yes.
very proud of myself at how talented I am.
Yeah, I love it. Well, yeah, I'm not an artist either, but I didn't get that skill set in my family. My brother did. I always admired what he was able to do, and I was frustrated because he'd just be like, "Yeah, I mean, you just practice it. You could do it. Anybody could do it." I was like, I can't do it. You're doing amazing things." So to have a tool like this that I feel, as you said, there you kind of create this visceral connection with the tool where you feel like it's responding to you in a way that feels to some degree intimate, I guess. Like it's
Yeah.
picking up your intention if you're crafting your kind of prompts correctly, and it's just generating this content that really captivates the imagination, at least for me. And my brother, who's looked at my art, he said a lot of your stuff is with the mid journeys, like it's kind of haunting. I was like, yeah, I mean that's kind of the vibe that I am really into. These things that are mysterious and a little bit, in some ways, disturbing. That kind of suck you in and you get lost in what's happening. Like I like that kind of depiction. But I guess before we get further down this train here, maybe we kind of back up a little bit. If somebody wanted to uh, start using Mid Journey, how do they go about doing that? What's the best way to get into it?
Yeah, I mean, I got into it through Discord, uh, which I think is fantastic. You have to sign up for it separately, but then there's a Discord channel where you actually do the thing.
Hmm.
I will be very honest and tell you that I've only been on Discord for the last month, and
Oh
that
wow.
Midjourney was a big part of that. I can be a little bit of a Luddite when it comes to that sort of thing,
Okay.
and I desperately feel like I don't need more ways for people to contact me. Um, so I'm reluctant to do anything new. So if I can figure out Discord and make this happen, really anyone can. So we'll
Nice.
we'll start there.
That's awesome. Yeah, Discord, it's a rabbit hole in its own right. So yeah, you may end up in other Discord servers at some point. Uh, so yeah, you can go to. They do have a website, which I guess we could put the website link in the description
Mhm.
that people can go to, and there's a link on the website to their Discord server. Obviously, you can download Discord from any mobile app store. I think there's even a desktop version of Discord as well. So once you create your Discord profile, go to their website, join their server, and then you get a chance to play around with the tool. There's kind of a trial period where you get, I don't know if it's like 5 or 10 sort of image attempts before they restrict your ability to use it, and then you have to jump into the paid tier structure, of which I think there are two primary tiers. There might be a third one, which is like a corporate tier, but there's the $10 a month and then $30 a month, and that really just dictates the amount of what they call GPU time that you get, and the number of images that you get to kind of upscale from the process. And with that term, I guess I'll unpack what that means too. We're using a lot of terms that people may not be familiar with. So when you're creating the art, you input a text phrase that's called a prompt, and the text phrase is really kind of the first part of that phrase is often what you want it to create. So you give it kind of a subject, and then the middle part of the phrase is often kind of the I don't know, maybe the colors or the accents or other elements in the art that you want to see represented. At least that's been my experience with it. And then the latter part of the phrase is often the kind of style that the art should try to emulate. So that might be something that's maybe computer graphic generated or photographic or realistic or insert style of your choosing. There's so many styles that you can play with. It has a vast library of images that it's looking at. And if you just give it the right information, it's going to pull those images. It could be 50s marketing propaganda or something. It'll pull from that and it'll apply that style to the prompt that you put in. So once you do that, it does a little bit of thinking in the Discord, and then it spits out 4 images that it thinks sort of comply with your request. And from there, you get a chance to upscale any one of those 4 images. So you can say, okay, I like number 1 or 3 or whatever, and you can choose to make it more detailed with a higher resolution, a higher quality version of that output, or you can ask it to create variations of one of those 4 images. So if you kind of like where it's going with image number 2, you can say, give me more versions of number 2, and it'll spit out 4 new versions that look pretty similar but have little variations in what that second image might look like. And then from there, you can choose to upscale what is something from that. And what I've heard a lot of people do is that it's really in the variations that you can get the kind of insane levels of accuracy to what you're trying to achieve. But did I do a pretty good job describing that, or is there anything else that you would add to that interaction process there?
No, I think you nailed it. I think that was great. I think it's an interesting process. Like, I'd love to know. For me, I feel like something that's hard for me, and the reason why I have to be on the highest paid package for this
Same.
thing is that, like, I need to upscale everything to the max, even if I don't necessarily love it, because the upscaling process is really revelatory. And
Mm.
sometimes I'll think that what I'm going to get is not going to be that great, but then I upscale and it's amazing. So I have like a real, like, no man left behind approach to.
I love that. Yeah, no, you're right though, because it is it's weird because it new details emerge from those upscaled versions that just make it that much more powerful. I'm also in that top tier, and I made the mistake of when I got into that tier thinking it was just going to be an unlimited image generation for the entire billing period or whatever. But what I didn't know is that when they task the AI with creating the images, they're asking their graphical processing units to spend time on it. And
Mm.
if you don't kind of toggle the settings, you have a limited kind of bandwidth of the highest speed processing time. And I didn't know that. So I just sort of blew through all of that within, I don't know, 10 days of being in that high tier. And then from there, if you want to continue processing your images with the same speed or upscaling them to the max, as you said, they start charging you extra GPU time to do that. So I'm sitting in a place right now where I really haven't upscaled a bunch of my images to the max, but I've got several that I'm like, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to upscale you to the max when my billing cycle refreshes so that I can get that better image. But if that gives you any hint on, I mean, I can pull up, maybe while we're chatting, I'll pull up like how many I've actually created. It's going to be embarrassing. But for me, it's been, it's a fun tool to get into and use. So yeah, I have, God, this is staggering. So I have lifetime usage since I started this was, I don't know, probably not even a month ago, over 2,000 images and almost 35 hours of time.
Oh, that doesn't
So
make me feel too bad. Okay. I'm at like 12, 1300. So
nice. Oh yeah, no, it's a problem, Kelly. It's a real problem.
you're heavy.
Um,
We're heavy users, as they say.
we are. Um, but it is so much fun. What are some of the things that we talked a little bit about it, but what are the things that you like the most about interacting with it? Is it something that, because there might be like obvious things that people are like, I just like creating art. But what are some things that surprised you about the interaction?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some of it's what you said. I really enjoy. There's something that's really haunting
Mm,
about the images. And what's interesting too is that I actually feel like my art and your art feel like often have kind of a similar vibe, which is
hmm.
not to say that this is I almost feel we're going to look at some of our art here in a minute, and
Right.
I think people would be surprised how much variance there is, because there does seem to, you and I seem to have a similar aesthetic in what we're
Isn't
into.
that weird, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a personality to it, even though it's coming from a machine. I mean, maybe that's has a lot to do with the similar prompts we our go-to prompt choices. Um, but even where I vary up these sort of style, I still get some stuff that feels kind of consistent with
Yeah.
the vibe I'm going for, which is eerie in a way. Um, yeah. Anything else that jumps out at you, like that really kind of keeps you coming back to it? Is it because it's just so easy? Like what how do you what draws you into this tool?
I think that it's watching this thing appear. It's feeling
Mm,
as though I'm a part of an active creation,
mm,
even though I know logically that I'm not creating it. It through the prompt, you do have a role in that, and
hmm.
so there's something about. I think you actually said it once. You said that you felt like you were communing with an AI god, and I was
Hmm.
like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like. And so I think it's really that. It feels like a contact experience in some ways. It feels
Mm,
it's where it's interacting with a non-human intelligence, and we're making something together, and
yes.
it's just a weird, beautiful experience. What about you?
Yeah. Um, I love that. I want to explore, and we're going to explore that some more because yeah, it is this. It's this odd dialectic process that I didn't expect. I can't even think of something. Well, I can. The only thing I can think of that is like a corollary to this before using Midjourney. I've used another AI tool that it was an app on. I don't know if it's on iPhone, but it's on Android, called AI Dungeon. And this was probably a year ago. Somebody had told me about it, and it's a think it uses the GPT-3 text generation technology, the AI text generation, and you can do a essentially like a text choose your own adventure with this app. So
Mm.
if you're used to those choose your own adventure games that you may have grown up with as a kid, where you would, kind of start, you'd travel down a tunnel and it'd say there's a door in front of you. What do you do? Do you open the door? So you can interact with that AI tool, and it'll generate this story content for you with characters, and you can interact with them. You can prompt them with things you want them to do, and it just literally creates this entire story in a genre of your choosing. And it's sort of similarly bizarre, that you're having this interaction with this non-human thing that has some clear structure. Yes, there's some awkward moments where it doesn't quite get it right, and you can tell that it's coming from a machine, but the fact that you can do it at all and have and feel something through that interaction is really telling to me. And that's something I absolutely get. In fact, I get more of that from using Midjourney. That feeling, that sensation of connection and awe, and sort of there's even a kind of sacred quality to it that that you might get if you're listening to music, and there's a piece of music that you really connect with, and it impacts you on a personal level. It, for me at least, using Midjourney, it's kind of doing the same thing, and I can, with the interaction and the prompts and whatnot, kind of working on those dials, you can refine that experience further. But even in that refinement, it presents to you this new content that you weren't expecting, and that then like elicits new ideas. Oh, I like what it did here with that series of prompts. What if I ask it to kind of go a little bit further down that path with some other elements? And it's this really cooperative yet mysterious creative process. I don't know, for me it's endlessly fascinating in that way.
Yeah, I totally get that. Are there things that you don't like about
Mm. Well, I don't like that I'm running out of GPU time.
it?
Yeah, it is. To me, it's obvious that we are kind of in the early days of this technology. It does do some things that are, I feel like, consistently fuzzy, and I don't necessarily even mean that in a resolution sense, but you can give it some fairly clear prompts, and what it will give back to you is like a almost like a surrealist Salvador Dali esque, version of what you're asking for. Like I tried to get a prompt of an F-18 jet or something, and it's like, I mean, we know what F-18 jets look like. Surely there's an F-18 jet in the image database, and it would spit out like this jet-ish looking thing. You're like, it's a jet, but it's got extra wings and protrusions on it that I don't know that it needed. So, what's happening there. So there's a lot of almost over interpretation that feels like it's doing sometimes, which
Yeah.
I've come to just be okay with, that I like. But it's definitely, if you're a very particular person, like if you're a person that goes into this thinking, oh, I'm going to put in this paragraph of great text, and I'm going to get exactly what I'm writing down, it's probably not going to do that for you. There will be some interpretive leaps. Now that being said, there is if you go to their website, there is, you can look at the community feed, things that everyone is creating, and there's some very impressive creations that are quite detailed and often do match pretty well with whatever that person was trying to generate. But most of those, I feel, are based on sort of people libraries. So
Yeah.
they're kind of doing portraits, just different versions of somebody famous, and because there's so many images of somebody famous, it does a pretty good job spitting out what that might look like for you. So yeah, I guess that's my issue, is the interpretive fuzziness around the process to a certain degree.
Yeah, that can be it's both the magic and the
Mm.
hindrance of it, right? Like I think that there's something that I've probably put in as a prompt more than anything else has been Hollow Earth.
Mm.
Um partly because I'm obsessed with Hollow Earth for reasons that are not rational. I just love it. But I like it because it doesn't know what to do with it.
Mm.
And it doesn't, and what it ends up show, like, I like to ask it for things that I know that it doesn't have. It's like, it's not going to be able to just query itself and find, 20,000 images of the same thing. And because there's something in its interpretation
Mm.
of it that I find really interesting. And there's a weird, almost like mystical experience to it where sometimes you get this feeling like you're being shown something secret,
Mm.
or which, obviously that's probably entirely irrational, but that's part of the joy of the experience.
Right.
But it is a little rough when it gets very confused, or it just doesn't, like you said, it doesn't know how to resolve itself in certain ways. And sometimes I really love the way that, like, the the landscape bleeds into the arms and limbs of a person, or that sort of thing. I've had really interesting outcomes from just putting the word UFO in with anything,
Mm-hmm.
sticking it in there, because it doesn't just put a UFO. It's like somebody is like becomes part UFO, and like their head
Mm-hmm.
UFO, or like something like that. And I find that. But if you're looking for something very particular, like, I've actually started using Midjourney to create all of my episode
Mm.
cover art. And I've had to learn to let go with that a little bit, because when I'm just creating for fun, it's okay when these things end up kind of like weird or bizarre. But when I'm trying to create something for something very specific, I can sometimes get a little frustrated.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Man, I love how you put that though, because it is that. It is that weird magic that it's kind of you're giving these things and it's interpreting them for you, the way that it's interpreting it, spitting it back to you. And I guess too, I'm sure it's doing this, but the more that it's used, and the more that people who use it rate certain jobs, it's ranking those jobs and kind of applying that feedback into its algorithmic, sort of machinations. Like if people put in certain prompts and they're all getting liked or upscaled, that's telling it this is what the humans want to see, or this may be closer to what the prompt should elicit. um, yeah, it's quite interesting. Other than that though, I don't know, I can't really fault it. It's the interface is maybe just a little bit clunky if you're not used to using Discord, and it can kind of look a little bit code-ish maybe if you're not comfortable looking at the grid and what the buttons might mean and everything. But that just takes a little bit of time to get used to. I'm sure there are like YouTube videos out there on how to create them. So if you're struggling, I would probably just point you to YouTube to see some tutorials or whatever. Once you get the basics down, though, I think it's pretty easy. Um, and then I guess the other thing I would say, if we're talking a little bit about tips, is to do what I said earlier. Go to the community feed and just kind of scroll through, or you can start. They have a search bar too if you want to look for something that you're interested in creating, and then just see what people have done that is in line with what you're looking to create, and then kind of copy their prompts, which it allows you to do. Now, I will say I have done that, and you probably have too a few times, and thinking like, oh, I'll just copy this prompt, and I'm probably going to get the same cool image that this person generated. And I've quickly
Yeah.
found out that it's not that simple.
Yeah.
It's not just create this job again. You really have to continue working with Midjourney to refine that output and get it to what you want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, should we show some of our art?
I think we should.
All right. Why don't we start with yours?
Okay, sure. Okay, cool. Yeah, this is the first one. So there's been in UFO Twitter, which is where we spend a lot of our time in that social media arena. There have been over the many months there have been people who have posted like Renaissance paintings where the artist may have put a interesting object in the sky that looks like a UFO, or the community saying, "Look, see, they're painting UFOs in Renaissance art." And I thought, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. What if I asked Midjourney to try to do that in the style of a certain Renaissance artist? And so I put in UFO, probably UFO in the sky, medieval, something something, Renaissance art, and this is what it spit out. It's it's really fascinating, right? I mean, just to
Yeah.
see this, and you're kind of like, yeah, I could see that in a Renaissance art exhibit. Like, that's what is it? It's a UFO, but it's got these like weird other components to it. The clouds that are kind of in there, and then I don't know. There's potentially like a being that's in the center above that rim of the UFO, maybe a cloaked figure. So there's a lot you can read into the way this piece is created, and it kind of gets your imagination working. But the fact that it could do this, and then I can look at it and go, yeah, that looks old. That looks like some old art that somebody painted in the 1500s or whatever. That's really cool, and it has eerie implications, I think, too, just for kind of where this all is going, which maybe we can touch on a little bit, in terms of this ability to co-opt styles and make it look incredibly convincing in the style of X. It really blurs the lines of what is a real piece of art, in history, and what is Midjourney art. Right now, we can, I think, pretty easily tell the difference, but perhaps one day that'll be much more challenging. So I love this one, and the community really liked it as well. When I put it up on my Twitter feed, just got a lot of positive feedback that for whatever reason this kind of spoke to folks. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think about this when you see it?
I love this one. I do think this one's very kind of arresting. And, it makes me think of, and I don't know, it's hard to explain. I mean, we talk a lot in the UFO community about how the UFO phenomenon has manifested or at least been interpreted in different ways throughout history. And so seeing this, it looks like a UFO as represented through that lens, and the fact that it's both recognizable as a UFO and that it's also recognizable, and there's a very little context around it, and yet
Mm.
I think it's still recognizable as a UFO to almost anyone, not even just weirdos like us who talk about UFOs all day. but but also that it's recognizable within that time period, in that context. Now granted, you told it to do that, right? So
Right.
there are layers there, but at the same time, it feels like the testing of a theory in a way that we all kind of kick around in a very hypothetical way about, like, well, maybe this is just how they were interpreting it, and
Mm.
this is how an artificial intelligence interprets a UFO through the lens of Renaissance art. So, does that confirm anything? No, but it's very interesting. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so true. Yeah, it has that baroque quality, and it's like what are you used to, and what are the artists of the day used to painting, and what styles do they use to depict certain images and figures. And I mean, it kind of nailed that. It I don't know.
Yeah,
It's strange. It's very strange.
very cool. Well, should we look at another one?
Sure. Yeah.
I love
Okay.
this one. I would love to hear where you were going. I want to be whoever this is.
Right. This one is like, I made several versions of this lady, and it was inspired by. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Chupacabra. It was inspired by his piece of the lady, and I was like, oh, let's see what else it can do with some different kind of lines of prompting here. So when I created this one, I was dabbling with using accent colors, which I had not done prior to this. Um, so I was telling the tool to add gold accents on, I think, white lines, just that basic phrase, and then doing a high resolution. I may have included something about kind of the billowing fabric or mystical qualities, or I think I even used the word etheric in the prompt, and immediately this one just like grabs you. It's
Yeah.
feminine, but it's mysteriously feminine. You're just like, I know that's female, but it's not necessarily obvious in the kind of traditional ways that we might think about that. Um, I love the swooping gold arc across the top. It's just really evocative. There's something not quite aggressive about it, but arresting. You use that word.
Mhm.
It's definitely jarring in its I don't know, majesty in a way. Like
Yeah.
it feels like you have to take this seriously, you know. And the fact that there isn't a face, that the face is kind of shrouded in this darkness, it I don't know, it really draws you right into like what is, is this a human? Is this a some sort of otherworldly being? What is happening here? And this outfit is just gorgeous. It's like, wow, like how could you wear that first of all anywhere? It seems like just super billowing, right? But it's I mean, if you wore that to a party, like everybody would be looking at that. Like it's absolutely incredible and flowing and detailed and yeah, it's this is a powerful piece, and I got a lot of folks that had interesting reactions to this one that ranged from really liking it and also kind of being a little bit shaken by it. That was
Mhm.
it felt like some of the comments I got were like, "Oh, I'm not so sure about that." Um, so it has that kind of power, which is, I don't know, true of a lot of the, at least it seems to be true, about a lot of the phenomenological experience, that it's awe inspiring and terrifying at the same time. Um, I don't know.
So
What
true.
do you think about this?
Yeah, no, I love this. And I, first of all, the just the fact that it created this garment, which
Mm,
is, like you said, absolutely incredible. If someone wore this to the Met Gala, like the biggest fashion event of the year, they would shut it down. They'd
hmm
be all anybody was talking about, right? It's incredible. And I love that it's soft and also terrifying. It's feminine and powerful. Like I don't know if I want to like fall on my knees and worship her or select her as my fighter in Mortal Kombat. But
Oh,
it
she's
could
got a
be
hidden
either.
sword in there somewewhere. There's definitely a sword in this outfit. I don't know where it is.
I could have sworn she had a sword.
Yeah,
It feels like she has a sword, doesn't
right.
it? Like
Yeah,
somewhere in there.
100%.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
that
Okay.
was fun.
More art.
Okay,
How
this
about this one?
one. So this one, I chose this one because I like the some of the more abstract representations that it kind of spits out. And for this series, I was doing a sacred geometry
Mm,
prompt, and I don't think I asked it to include any kind of figure in the prompt, but it inserted this tiny humanoid looking black space basically right there in the center. And for me, it just it kind of spoke to me. It's almost like this solitary, meditative person who's on a journey,
mm,
and what we're seeing is this other plane of reality that they are at the intersection of. These crisscrossing lines of red and white, and this dark void that's in front of them, almost like the cosmic void. It's to me it has this rootedness quality to it, this interconnected web that that meditative journey inspires, uh, but it also has this going forth into the unknown. What lies ahead of you is uncertain. So yeah, it's similarly evocative and jarring and but solemn or contemplative in a way as well for me. Um, yeah, I don't know. I did a lot of the sacred geometry stuff, and every time it was like, here, check this cool thing out.
mm.
Who needs drugs? Just stare at this for a while.
No, exactly. I love this one. I really resonate with it. I don't know that I can say anything better than what you said about it. Um, but I mean, you and I have had deeper conversations like offline and that sort of thing, and I really understand why you love this, and I really love it for the same reasons.
Thanks.
And then this
Okay.
one,
Yes, this one. All
this
right.
is
So
wild.
it's yeah. Oh man, this was cool. So I tried to do some that were representations of historical UFO, classic UFO encounters, and with this one, I was going for the Phoenix Lights.
Mm.
And so it wasn't I wasn't just putting in Phoenix lights and seeing what it spit out. Although that would be amazing if it spit out this triangle. But one of the inputs was a black triangle with some kind of bright accents, and I think I said over Phoenix, and it would just create these imposing, gigantic, dark triangles in the sky with odd textures that are very if you look at that it almost feels like geological, like there's kind of a rockiness quality to it. It's not necessarily that classic smooth metallic structure. There's this ancientness to it, and then this highlighted kind of cloud that is behind it, essentially blocking out the sun in a way, and we're getting these reflections off the top of the structure into the clouds above, with the night sky of Phoenix below. Like it is just it makes me think of a lot of our classic sort of Hollywood arrival scenes. This otherworldly craft appearing above a metropolis, and everyone's just dropping their cappuccino or whatever, just staring gobsmacked up at the sky. Like that's how I would feel if I saw this thing come out of the atmosphere. So I don't know, it was pretty cool, and I liked seeing, just like creating a little gallery of images that were tied to these classic experiences that have become part of the UFO lore, and we all have our own kind of mythology that we've created around these stories, and we they've entered our imaginations in various ways as well. Even though some of them have, like with Phoenix Lights, there are some like still images or video clips of the lights in the sky, but we kind of fill in the blanks with what that might have looked like. And so to have this collection of images that might bring a greater degree of specificity or immersion into the experience, like that's kind of what I was going for.
I love that. And something that I really love that Midjourney does sometimes, because obviously, I mean, I think we both ask it to make UFOs a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I really love these more kind of organic, geological looking UFOs. There's something just so compelling about them, especially because when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense in
Mm.
terms of what could exist out there. Like Avi Loeb, Dr. Avi Loeb was very into Oumuamua.
Mm-hmm.
And, his thought that this could have really been an actual probe or something, not just a weirdly shaped asteroid. Really interesting if you haven't read about it. And something like that, something that would appear like it was an astronaut or an asteroid.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting. It looks like an
We
astronaut.
can create that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Or a mountain, or just something that, I don't know, if you had really high tech stuff, it's like those rocks that you can put your key in and leave it outside your door, only this is like the UFO version.
Totally. That a quick interjection on that, because it came to mind. I think it's a really cool book. I think it's called The Sparrow, and in that story, it's about um, a journey to another world from Earth, and their spacecraft is literally inserted inside of an asteroid. So
Ah.
it's like constructed outside of the Earth's gravity and space, and they slap on some thrusters to that thing, and they shoot off toward this other planet. And the reason why they use that kind of rocky shell is it is like a radiation protection
Mm.
and across that interstellar journey. So it's really cool, and we're interesting to kind of mix those two things together, right? That organic and manufactured medium. So yeah. Anyway, cool. Let's take a look at some of yours. I love your pieces, so I want to get through them.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, here's a good one to go to next. Well, nope, I did it backwards. We'll start here. So, so this one, I really love this one. I'm really intrigued by some of the ones that have a lot of depth like this, like that are cityscapes or that feel. I liked this one because it felt dreamlike. And there was something about this that felt very personal to me. Sometimes things come out and they're just cool or they're just weird, but every once in a while they'll get something that resonates in a way that you're just like, it feels, I don't know, it feels personal, like somehow you were involved more, or that somehow it was trying to tell you something. And that's just arbitrary, but it's a very powerful feeling when it happens. And this one, I really felt that about. It felt like a new world
Hmm.
being built out of books and knowledge. And I'm very weird and superstitious about books. I mean, I'm a book person. I think most book people feel that way. And like, I had stopped reading for years,
Hmm.
actually. Like
Hmm.
I got really, I'm a marketer by trade. And so, if it wasn't a book for work or something, I mostly didn't read for years. And I got back into it, and suddenly I was like obsessed. And so I've got bookshelves and bookshelves and bookshelves. I have books show up literally almost every day at my house. It's not a joke,
Wow.
it's an issue. And and I buy books even when I know I don't have the time to read them. I have more books than I could ever possibly read.
Hmm.
But I swear to you that I get something by osmosis from
Hmm.
owning it. There's something about owning it that is very important to me, and at least like knowing that I have it. Um, so for me, the idea of building a world out of books, because that's what books are for me.
Hmm.
It's like the fastest way for you to get inside of a subject, or get inside of somebody's head, or and it makes your world. The only other thing, and it's also a great love of mine, that does a similar thing, is travel,
Hmm.
where it just makes your world bigger. And so I this really spoke to me.
Love it. It's absolutely beautiful. It has that dreamlike quality, as you mentioned. Uh, the books are like residents in these, sort of skyscrapers. So they're almost like people. You can clearly tell they are books. It has that library shelf quality, but it also has the apartment skyscraper residence quality to it as well. Honestly, I never even thought about skyscrapers in that same way. Comparing those cellular units of the building to books on a shelf, and this absolutely nails that. And it has this really interesting superposition too, which I've seen Midjourney do in other instances, where it's almost like there's more than one. I'm going to use the word painting. That's not the right word. There's more than one image happening in this singular image. There's this amazing depth to it where you can come back and you can see, oh, like I could experience this from a completely different perspective, from a cityscape or at the street level versus what's happening up in the tower. It can feel big. It can also feel very intimate. So I don't know. You just absolutely nailed it. And this, I will say too. I don't know if you do this intentionally, but I notice a lot of your pieces have this kind of softness to them, or they have a similar kind of color palette that for me seems to continue to appear. I don't know if you're using any kind of color prompts more consistently, but if I saw this and having seen your other pieces, I could definitely say like, yep, this is a Kelly piece. Like it feels like it's you.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I get that feeling when I look at my stuff too, but I don't really. Like I actually don't. A lot of, like, the only prompt I put in for this was a sixth density being.
Mm,
That was it. And
wow.
like I get this a lot of this blue and red, which I
Mm-hmm.
find interesting. I even do that with my lights here. Like
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
kind of like that vibe.
Yes.
Um so yeah, it's very interesting. There's another one in here that's very, yeah. I had to actually try to find ones that were more varied,
Hmm.
because so many, even though I do this over long periods of time and with all different prompts, they end up, there is a sameness about them, which is very strange,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Very
Let's see
weird.
the next one.
Um, this is another one. This is probably my
Yes.
favorite one ever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this one actually came out of the same, which was what was so crazy, is that it came out of the same one as that one with the books.
Wow.
This was also just a sixth density being. That was it. Um, I'm obsessed with this. I
Mm-hmm.
love it because I want to write an entire like sci-fi thriller series about this character that appears here. Like I feel I knew immediately in my soul that this being is a time traveling assassin That just seemed very
Please
curious.
write this story. I love it.
Right. And I don't know, I was really overcome by this one. I was really overwhelmed by it. There's actually a book. It's one of my favorite fiction books that I've read over the last year called This Is How You Lose the Time War.
Hmm.
And it's one of the characters is named Red, and the other character is named Blue, and they're
Wow.
both time agents. And this looks like Red to me, and I was just absolutely, I wasn't thinking of that at the time, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh. And I love how it feels, like you said before, that there's almost a dimensionality to it. Like there's different, like there might be different realities kind of layered on top of each other here. Maybe this isn't so much a time traveler as an interdimensional traveler,
Mm.
but it feels like a being that's like unstuck in some ways, and yet like very present and very fiery and very real. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to think of this one, but I think of it all the time, actually. I really do.
It's captivating. It's incredibly cool. I love this figure, this ghostly apparition quality to it. The thing that it also makes me think of when I'm seeing this outline is how this being, this person, is not only a person, a figure, but a doorway. There's this kind of portal-esque, invitation to this outline. The way that it's using the darkness and that pillar of light in the center of the composition. There's this kind of bleeding in between these worlds. It's there, it's not there, it's definitely up to something. It's got this kind of like, if like Blade Runner were a ghost story, in a way. Like it's got that kind of crossover with the cityscape. I don't know, it's absolutely captivating. I would at 100% read that story, so please write it.
Maybe someday. It does have that vibe of like it caught you, like it's
Mm,
like it just noticed you, and that's not a good thing
mm-mm.
necessarily.
Like a Dementor from Harry Potter or something. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
something no
I'm
good.
obsessed. Um, and then this one is another. This would be the other one that would be kind of a tie for my all-time fave,
Mm.
because I do not know what I'm looking at here. But I once again am very intrigued. Like it feels like an alien planet.
Mm.
There's something back in like the very center background that almost looks like it might be like a sphinx out in the desert or something.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I love that this feels almost, it feels at the same time both religious and sort of like bureaucratic in some way.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I love it so much because it feels like I'm looking into a fully realized world
Mm.
with its own perspective and culture and history. And I don't know what any of that stuff is. However, it feels fully realized in a lot of ways, and it feels mid story. Like Midjourney, right?
Mm.
It feels that way. Like it feels, I don't know. This one I have a really hard time putting words to, but I will stare at it for a very long time because it feels like it feels like a story. It feels complete, and it feels real. It doesn't feel random. There's something about it that just draws me in.
Mm-hmm.
What
It's
do you think this is when you look at it?
it's alluring. I love that you use the word, bureaucratic, because immediately what I had the sense of here is that uh, there's this royalty, or the person who's in the foreground, this figure who's robed. They are a person of veneration. They hold authority, um, but it's a solitary, kind of almost like burdensome role. The sort of cloaked type figure that's on the right on the wall. It almost could be just a cloak hanging on the wall, but it makes me think of like a courtly guard that is just sort of there, but in this really sci-fi futuristic tech way, like, because it's ominous looking. Like, watch your step as you come into the presence of this person, because this, whatever this is, will take you out. Then the foreground individual, that's actually the most well-defined kind of person in the composition, it makes me think of like a courtly I don't know what the right term is, but someone that kind of announces the king or the queen is there. They're there to receive whoever is coming to pay homage to this individual, and then it kind of keeps going into the background from there. There's almost like a processional with that tiny little figure that's in the center, entering into this high court kind of space. These giant objects, you talked about the Sphinx in the background. I love that. The other giant objects are, in a sense, like high tech sculptural versions of this royal person that
Mm.
that just exist in this world. So, I mean, right there, just as you said, like I'm creating this entire story about what's happening here in this other universe. At the same time, the other word I was going to use is it has like a there's like a department store quality to it too, which is like
Yeah.
completely different. It's the way in which, like, if you were a kid and you went to the department store with your parents or whatever, and they had all the mannequins everywhere, like that the mannequins were like fascinating to you, but also creepy. The way that they're just kind of just sitting there standing. So I get that vibe as well, that it's this futuristic, abandoned, J.C. Penney or something. I don't know. So totally different directions here. I prefer the former, not the latter, but you could write stories about both.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is it just feels there's so many weird little details that it feels very intentional, and it feels like there must be your brain just goes wild just
Mm-hmm.
trying to yeah. So that's a fun one. And then this was the last one. This one, there's a meditation that I've been listening to often that I've really been enjoying. And it has this line in it that says, do not worship the gate, go into the inner sanctum.
Mm.
And and so I just put that in, nothing else, as the prompt. And I got a few different beautiful images, and this one in some ways was the least defined and also the least ornate, and in many ways the most imperfect. But there was something about it. It was the one. All the other ones had this person kind of sitting very much in a what was very clearly an ornate temple cathedral sort of setting, whereas this, like, you definitely have that vibe, but it's also so very clear that that this temple is outside. And especially for what the prompt was, that there's this connection with nature, and that this inner sanctum that you're going into in some ways is also all around you. It's both
Mm.
inside you and outside you. And there was something about it that I felt like spoke to that in such a really beautiful and metaphorical way. And also the idea that, we go into these spaces that we create for worship that
Mm.
are, there's a lot of, ornate decoration and right angles. And it takes sometimes hundreds of years to build these things.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's a kind of communion with your creator, and a kind of worship that you can engage in a natural space that I think you can't. The quality of it is somehow different. And I love beautiful cathedrals and religious spaces in general, but yeah, the juxtaposition of those two things, especially with the prompt, just felt very profound to me.
Totally. This is a piece where having the prompt as the title of the piece displayed to the observer, I think, really captures the experience, and it's a good example of how the process of inputting something that you wanted to create, but also forcing it in certain directions after it's generating whatever it thinks you want. Like, is this co-creative process that does elicit a, a very powerful experience that is connected in this intimate, mysterious way to your intention. So you have brought to life an element of your intention in a fashion that you on your own did not conceive or create. You really have this partner that is your ally in bringing this vision to life. And I mean, it's lovely. I mean, I love it. I love the this comparison between these organic shapes and clearly a structural archway. This solitary figure who has the sense in which they could be coming and going,
Hmm.
so you can kind of play with both of those, what both of those sort of transitions might mean. It's great. I just love it. I mean, I love this stuff, like it just, and it's even more meaningful because I didn't really know. I've seen your pieces, but not known necessarily what you were asking it to create. So being able to talk with you about it adds another layer of meaning to me. It just increases my enjoyment of the work. So I'm so glad we got to look at these.
I know, it makes me feel like we should do this more often, like get a little group together or something and just look at everybody brings show and tell of their
I'm down.
AI art. Especially because we were talking about this earlier. I'm like so proud of them. You're like, this is great. And I'm like, thank you. Thank you so much. It's just like, did I make this?
I slaved over this one for
Right?
many GPU cycles.
Right? I upscaled it so hard.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. Well, I'm glad we got a chance to look at those, and as we kind of transition back to toward the end of the chat, it's not been all, I guess, love and roses or whatever. There have been a lot of concerns about the technology. A few articles have been written about Midjourney and other tools similar to it, raising some concerns that folks have had about this kind of technology. Um, one of the concerns that I remember reading is that the image databases that the tools use are oftentimes a little bit kind of murky in where they're pulling the images from. One of these tools, I think it may in fact be Midjourney, uses, I want to say, Pinterest as a source of an image library. And the tricky thing with Pinterest is uh, the images in Pinterest are uploaded by the users. They're not necessarily licensed to Pinterest by the artists in some cases who own that work. And so there have been examples of artists who have seen some creations from Midjourney and have said, well, that looks a lot like, my art style. Or even more explicitly, some people are using the name of the artist in their image prompt. And because it happens to have art in its image library from that person, it's able to emulate the style of that person in the output. So we get into this interesting kind of murky area where what it's creating isn't the exact art from that artist, but it's kind of approximate. Is it stealing from the artist? Is it harming the artist and their ability to make a living in some cases off of art that might be very similar? Uh, so that's one of the issues that I came across just from the artist community, I suppose, and some artists even going so far as to look up whether their art was in any of these libraries and formally request the removal of their art from the libraries so that the tool couldn't mimic their style in its output. Are there other concerns you've heard about, or any concerns that you thought about related to this technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think the intellectual property stuff is rough because this just changes the game so entirely. And I'm a creative, and I work in a creative field,
Mhm.
and I know you are as well. And we so intellectual property is important to me to a certain regard because I wouldn't want somebody to just steal things that I've put so much of my blood, sweat, and tears into. I'm also somebody who has, I've never been like a working artist, but I have been a freelancer. And
Mhm.
it's hard to get people to pay you what you're worth. And artists have a hard time with that because people are like, why would I give you, $3,000 for a painting? But you're paying somebody for the 10,000 hours of work that it took for them to learn their craft and to get really, really good at it. You're not paying them for the time that it takes to do a painting, but also a painting might actually take 3,000 hours worth of work. I mean, $3,000 worth
Mhm.
of work. So, and I think it's hard for people for artists to convey that and the importance of what they do, and why they should get paid appropriately for their work. Um, and in that kind of situation, if another, I mean, we already lived in a world where then artists would see other artists' work and interpret it through their own talent and perspective and context, and then spit it back out as something else.
Mm.
Most art, I think you can make the argument that most art is derivative.
Mhm.
Um, and so, is this really different? And it's like, well, yeah, it is. It's different because of the speed and the scale at
Mm.
which this can happen. And I'm a writer, and I at work I've got a team of copywriters, and now we just brought on an AI tool to help do some of our copywriting, because like we have to
Mm.
keep up. I never thought I'd see that day where AI got good enough that it could replace some of my copywriters. And I'm not letting it replace my copywriters, but it's only a matter of time, honestly.
Mhm.
And so it brings up a lot of questions about, do we want this? But the problem is, I think we created these tools and uh these different modalities without really answering any of those questions.
Yeah.
And now we just have to deal with it. Like
Right.
we're going to have to figure out what the world looks like in a place where we can't tell if art is real, and we don't know who made it. And how to artists, I think, are an important part of our society. So how do we take care of artists
Mm.
in this new paradigm? It's all very complicated, and I don't think anybody has great answers for it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Does this dissuade artists from continuing to create? Does it dissuade future artists that want to get into art? Because how can they compete with this tool that kind of mimics your imagination? Does it drive new art forms, which I'm sure that it will, and I think that it does. So the art will evolve in response to the existence of this tool. Um, what does it mean to have something come directly from a human hand other than the human mind? We're always using tools to create art, but this feels, sort of radically different, as you mentioned, just in our ability to keep pace with it. So does art become meaningful not because of what it is, but because of what went into its creation? Do you value art from that time investment, as you mentioned, more than you would value what it represents for you or evokes in you? These are huge questions. And we're just talking about, digital kind of flat images. Once we, take this technology to its inevitable future states, we're talking about, you know, real time generated dreamscapes that
Mm-hmm.
you can get lost in. It'll change the way we interact with each other. It'll change the way we live and work and play. I mean, all of these areas of our human experience are going to be radically altered. Um, and so I think it's like in that way, as we talked about some of these concerns, it reminds me of the ways in which we have some similar fears about our interactions with non-human intelligence, sort of generally. What is the arrival of an alien, species mean for humanity and how we understand ourselves, how we interact with them, how we understand the world and reality itself? Like all of these things are, become front and center. So we're already getting a glimpse of that with something that we have created, that we probably only superficially understand. I mean, we certainly like built it, but the degree of complexity that these tools represent, uh, at some point they're going to eclipse our ability to really even know what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah.
So it's a brave new world for sure. Um,
Yeah, and I think something that makes me think about a lot is that, this makes us talk very specifically about art.
hmm,
And I find it really interesting that's kind of where AI has taken us almost first, because I think in a lot of ways we were told that more creative professions were gonna last longer
Safe.
in this
Yeah.
sort of like AI apocalypse. But turns out art is being to be like one of the first ones to get hit, which is crazy. Did not see that coming 10 years ago.
Mm-mm.
Absolutely not. Um,
Mm.
but you know, all all professions, all talents, all everything, it can eventually be subsumed by AI. And it's probably going to happen slowly and then all at once.
Mm.
And we have structured our entire civilization around the idea that a person's worth is equal to their output.
Mm.
And so, what do we do now?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all of us have definitely, I mean, not all of us, I think that there are a lot of us who agree that a person's worth isn't equivalent to their output. But
Mm-hmm.
in terms of structuring a society, that's been a pretty convenient way
Mm-hmm.
to do things. But what do you do when 75% of the population is unemployable?
Mm-hmm.
Then what? And how do we define the value of a human life? Because I think that we're going to really have to figure that out. Because if you when you see the way that certain sections of our society look even at people who very legitimately and out of a real need are collecting welfare, what are we going to do when 75% of people can't work? What does that look like? And we've got to figure that out, because I think that some really ugly, scary stuff could come out of a world where if we decide that output equals worth, and then suddenly we have a huge section of the population that we've now deemed worthless.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to think about where that goes. And so I think we as a society need to start talking about this, and fast, because it's probably going to happen faster than we think.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Yeah, this is a paradigm shift, and it's rare when you can see that kind of coming at you. But I feel like these tools really do put it in stark relief. Like this is not something we can talk about in hypothetical terms. You know, this is happening now. These tools they're in the wild. They're only going to get better, and they're going to grow in ways that we can't understand and comprehend, and they're going to interact with us in ways that, quite frankly, we might be powerless to resist. I know we've already talked about our own, sort of draw to this tool, and sometimes you can't put it down when you're in that creative flow, and you really want it to generate some something from your imagination. You can't walk away. Imagine it doing that successfully on the first try every time over and over again. You would be tethered to this technology,
Mm-hmm.
and we're already tethered to poor approximations of it right now. Um, so it's I think you've nailed it. It does really put into uh, I think focus the value question, um, and it, and flowing from that question is are things about how we reorder our entire civilization. How we go about doing things that we think are normal. I mean, really, this is that kind of glimpse. If we always we joke when we look back 100 years and go, "Oh, look at how those people used to live," and riding around on horses and stuff. And if only they knew what it was like now. I mean, I don't know if who needs to hear this, but 100 years from now, it's going to be so abstract from what we know to be normal now. They will have the exact same reaction, if not more so. Um, if presuming we all live, the world survives into 100 years. Um, so yeah, it's wild that we can get these amazing, this one tool which is so satisfying to use really does, uh, kind of elicit these bigger questions. Um, and we're not even done, right? So I mean, what are some other sort of things that you think this technology is sort of portends for the world? Where do you see this going, either through this art generation or other things that AI may impact?
I think it's going to be really interesting. A lot of the work that I'm doing outside of my podcast, I'm working on a book right now, and um, it's about storytelling as
Mm.
a technology. And the thing is that there are anybody who studied the hero's journey or film theory or there's all sorts of, creative writing, all sorts of things. Like, you know about the hero's journey, and it is a very particular piece of technology that works a very particular way. And we could algorithmically insert that into just about anything,
Mm.
and probably do a better job than most screenwriters. The computer could probably handle that even better. So if we could, I can't see that there's really any piece of entertainment, media, marketing, anything that we interact with all day long. It's already taking over our lives. When you were talking about like what's life going to be like 100 years from now, somebody 100 years ago would look in my office right now where I'm sitting and think like, what is this place? Because I've got like lights set up and screens everywhere, and I do most of my socializing right here.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Yeah,
being real.
totally.
And it's such a bizarre. And so what does that look like? What does it look like when AI is creating everything that we interact with, and it's been custom tuned and is constantly learning algorithmically? As much as I'm entranced by this and I love it, I'm feeling this deeper and deeper urgency to start separating myself from technology, because I'm just like, ooh, what is this? Because I don't totally know what it is. And it's getting to this point where I feel like I've accepted that humans are controlling me through the media and through, not in like some deep conspiratorial way, but, in the way that I'm a marketer. So like, this is what I think about all day. I'm like
Sure.
very aware of the ways in which we're all being controlled and manipulated. Because unfortunately that's part of my job. But I don't know. I just worry, what does it look like when we take that apparatus that we've built that's brought us, to the brink of civil war, and it's brought us QAnon, and it's brought us like all of these other crazy things. What happens when like we put AI at the wheel of that? Do things get significantly better? Do they get worse, or do they just get real weird? I don't know, but it seems a little scary to me.
Yeah. It's ominous is the word that I would use. Like it's to know that as individuals we can have these incredibly personal, intimate experiences that draw from pieces of ourselves, and it's this dynamic feedback loop where you can be fed things that are perfectly suited to satisfy you,
Mm-hmm.
uh, or adjusting this knob to disgust you, or adjusting this knob to inspire you. Which of these dials do you decide to work with, and for what reason? So do you disappear into an AI mediated coma? Because why would you not? What is it definitely begs the question about what are the things of value in the real world, quote unquote, the world that isn't mediated through these devices, and what isn't. It's going to be quite strange, and particularly to those that are straddling these transitional periods. For those of us that have grown up and seen the technological evolutions that have taken place, in a way, we're kind of like the frog in the pot that's slowly boiling. We feel kind of proud of ourselves that we can adapt to these new pieces of technology and software, because yeah, we were kids when it happened and grew up in it, and like it's not intimidating to us. At the same time, we're I think that's our blind spot too. Like we don't quite see what might be coming, and we may, those of us who've gone through that transition, who remember the olden days where this stuff wasn't as prevalent, right? We may be the only ones who can ring the alarm bell.
Yeah.
Those that are younger than us, who've been born into the world as it is, have no ability to even understand something that would be different than that. So it is quite daunting, and it makes me think too that there are, in a weird way, it's almost, there are these, the tendrils of the future are present in our experience today. That it's reaching back from where it may go, and we are interacting with it's this little piece of it, and if you just kind of follow that thread, you can see this, wild future that exists. Um, it's intersecting with our reality now in ways that are quite disturbing, awe-inspiring, phenomenological, for lack of a better word. And so,
Yeah.
to kind of go in a direction where we're used to talking about with UFOs and stuff, um, this stuff to me, this technology, AI, and everything, like it presents an opportunity to, have an alien phenomenological experience with something that
Mhm.
is directly from here, like that we have created, right? So to insert your alien of choice or your hypothesis of choice that's not AI, it's just a matter of a degree in certain ways, philosophically. It doesn't necessarily matter as much where they come from. We're already interacting with things that are outside of our comprehension. Um,
Yeah. I don't know. I'll link to this in the episode description, but I don't know if you've ever seen that video where it was like from the end of the 90s and David Bowie was being interviewed about the internet.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
there's
clip,
I'll have
yeah.
to yeah, I'll have to put that in the episode description. Everybody should watch that. It's absolutely amazing because he understood what the internet was before most people did. And he compared it to an alien life form.
Yeah, there you
Um,
go.
and the guy was like, "What are you talking about? It's just like another way to communicate, right?" And he was like, "No, man, you have no idea what's about to happen." Um, and he was talking about how uh, the separation basically between user and content was going to be completely eroded, and that like the
Mm,
user and content were going to become essentially like simpatico and kind of
mm,
the same thing. And all of our technology has been on that path. Even an app is just an interface that helps you access something a little more directly, right? And that's what all of these things are doing. And so what happens is that line between our consciousness and the things that our consciousness is taking in and observing, when that line disappears, it's like, what are we even? Like, if you, and it makes me wonder, and especially seeing how quickly things have happened since the
mm,
advent of the internet, and you think about how
mm-hmm.
now we like upscale and we sit and we wait and we wait.
Right.
We're going to think back and be like, remember when you and I used to sit around waiting for,
Waiting on the image, yeah.
right? It's like dial up. But seeing how fast it's
Mm,
happened, it makes me wonder, have we already, I think we've probably already crossed a line that we
mm-hmm.
didn't know that we crossed when we
Yeah.
crossed it. And it's not just a line of technological development. I think it's an evolutionary
Mm,
development, because in some ways we're already becoming part machine.
mm-hmm.
We know, I mean, 100 years ago, anybody you stopped on the street could probably recite the Constitution to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was how people learned things, was
Right.
they memorized them and they kept them in their brain. But I don't remember shit. I don't know the code to get into my own building because I don't need to. I
Mm-hmm.
have that information in my phone when I need to look it up. So um yeah, it's like, have we become something different? And I think that we have.
Absolutely. No, without a doubt. I mean, we've unleashed these things onto the world. They are our progeny. And the rate of change that they will undergo, will far exceed the rate of change that we are, sort of evolutionarily, biologically suited to cope with. Um, and we often talk about, how dangerous AI can be, particularly in the hands of our adversaries. But to me, interacting with this, I don't think anybody's safe from what these things can do. Just because an adversary can create an I mean, they're going to have to deal with it too. These things are going to do and interact with the world and in the world in ways that we cannot foresee. Um, they will become, either our overlords or our partners. We will, the optimists say that we will, kind of fuse with that technology, just as you indicated, as we have now. And the only way we won't become subsumed by it is to, be a part of it, and in a more, direct and intimate way. That's if we're lucky. And I think if we're not, then we're just going to play by the rules that these systems will dictate for us, which the optimists might say, well, that could be quite good. Maybe they will look at the complexity of the world and devise a kind of motivating scheme for all of its occupants to get along. Maybe it'll figure out a way to solve some of our most intractable problems. That would be amazing. Or it could decide that we are the problem and we're not that intractable. We can be dealt with pretty easily. Um,
Yeah.
this took
And
a
I
dark
think that,
turn.
well, I mean, it's there. And I was going
Yeah.
to say what the peril in this is so evident because both of us are like, yeah, dude, could be the end of the world.
Hmm.
And yet we can't put it down, right?
Right.
We see the problems, we understand the ethical implications, the philosophical implications. It's not like we're blind to any of that. I think we're both acutely aware of it, probably more than a lot of people, just because of the subject matter that we're usually kind of
Mm.
immersed in our weird
Hmm.
little corner of the world. But yeah, and yet we can't put it down. So do we
Right.
want to talk about this a little bit from like kind of the how do you
Hmm.
how do you frame this in the context of the phenomenon and just and consciousness and kind of all of these topics
Mm.
that we all kind of marinate in all day?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll start with the consciousness piece because I feel like it is the game in a way. Um, so more and more, I'm looking at reality as sort of these infinite expressions of conscious activity, and uh, you can work that all the way up and down the scale. So to macro consciousness at large, has a certain behavior or impulse toward experience and novelty and whatnot, to the lowest level of conscious experience. The underlying drivers of that behavior are essentially the same. And what we have done in pursuing these technologies is in many ways like that natural conclusion of conscious behavior. Like we're doing things that consciousness would do and has already in fact done with ourselves. So just as fascinated as we are with AI and what it's doing with this tool and the outputs that it's creating, consciousness at large is just as fascinated and drawn in uh, and you know attracted to all of these other entities that exist within it. It has the same kind of magnetic pull and desire, and there's this sort of through line that you can draw from that top all the way to the bottom. So in some ways, it kind of makes me feel more intimately connected to the conscious universe, because it's like here I am participating in a thing. I mean, not that I needed this tool to feel this way, but for me, it brings it in kind of clear relief that anytime that you are creating in the act of creation, you are uh, kind of doing what consciousness wants. You are expressing the urge of consciousness, um, and so that's generally how I think about this. Um, kind of overall within that framework, of course, like there are, I think, other entities just like ourselves. Like we live in a rich, um, densely populated reality with lots of entities and other intelligences who are doing the same things that we're doing. We're just not as aware of them. We're not. We have the blinders on, and that's for good reason. Um, but they're there and they're doing what they do, and what drives them to do what they do is the same thing that drives us to do what we do. And there are good behaviors and bad behaviors and everything in between. Uh, but we are all part of this grand mix of consciousness, doing what consciousness does, and that's creating and seeking novelty and beauty and all those things and unity. I think there is this drive to a unity or unifying experience. and that just as there is a drive to individuality. So I think that as powerful as that feeling of oneness is that we often all can relate to, if you've had kind of uh, a spiritual experience, that as powerful as that is, I think there's an equally powerful lure toward individual expression. That it's almost like the moment that you reach that unity experience, you kind of feel within you this urge to break away from it and do something a little bit different. And so it's I kind of the reason why I find that compelling is it uh, it redeems the sort of full scope of what we see happening in lived experience.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I would go. I don't know about you with that or the other elements that we're so used to talking about.
Yeah, no, and I really love that perspective. I think for me, I think a lot about how it works in general. I feel like I'm in some ways when I'm working with it, I'm as much asking questions about the nature of consciousness in general as I am about the nature of this AI, which granted, I'm not suggesting that it's sentient necessarily, but that, there's all kinds of things that our brain does without us, right?
Mm.
There's the whole like autonomic nervous system. Your body is handling many things that you're never really that conscious of until something
Hmm.
goes wrong. Um, but also other things like, there have been studies that shown that we make decisions almost instantaneously without actually processing any of the information. Like there's that our brain does a lot of weird stuff. And
Mm.
it's really we have the illusion that there's a lot of illusion that goes into the making up of our lived experience. Like our lived experience is a very small fraction of what our body is doing, of what our brain is doing. It's not really representative of what's even actually around us. It's our
Hmm.
lived experience is this very weird hallucination. And this feels almost like a way of peering into that process in a certain way because
Mm.
it's filled with our images, our art, our history, our all of it, and then it pulls from that in the same way that we pull from our this huge, rich, immersive experience of our life that we have, and we pull from that stuff all the time, even when we're not necessarily conscious of it. So
Mm.
I think about that a lot. I also think a lot about how like we were talking about before, how the phenomenon has manifested itself or at least been interpreted in so many different ways throughout human history. But even now, if you talk to like a really hardcore MUFON investigator who's been doing this for 20, 30 years, they'll tell you that like the fastest way that they weed out a fake story is a story that makes too much sense.
Mm.
Encounters with another intelligence are like bizarre and they're weird and they're not quite right. And they kind of look like what you would expect it to, but not really. There's always some sort of weird, contradictory, dreamlike weirdness involved, right? And
Mm.
it makes me wonder what it is that we're interacting with. Because if you were going, like, if we are, if we were going to be interacting with an intelligence that was not even necessarily more advanced than us, but just different,
Hmm.
um, how would they talk to us?
Mm.
And it would probably be through some sort of like a visual interface that pulled from our expectations and our archetypes and our, the images that we share culturally and as a
Hmm.
species. And it just makes me wonder what it is that we're interacting with, and it's made me think differently about how another kind of intelligence might try to interact with
Hmm.
us. If you couldn't like how would you talk to an ant? Like how would you do it if you really
Hmm.
needed to get a message across to ants?
Hmm.
What would you how would you do that?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm just trying that's probably where it goes for me a lot.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's spot on insight, right? That this transcription problem, between different intelligent agents, right? And how that kind of manifests itself in our experience. We're always using our existing models and overlaying those models on the experiences which we have, and that defines the experience. It's not. We like to think of it as an interpretation, but it for us, it's not thought of as an interpretation. It is what reality, literally feels like for us. Um, so, yeah, to use a tool like this, where it, in some ways, kind of draws from our subconscious, sort of in this mystical way, but it makes it come alive uh, as we interact with it. But what it's presenting to us, it, from its vantage point, is, it's not necessarily what our experience of it will be, right? So that's a good maybe parallel too, right? It's projecting out something that, it thinks we may want to see, but we're still seeing it in our through our own lens of interpretation, and
Mhm.
and seeing that, oh, you asked for what was it, the hardest time getting, like, asked for Reagan, Ronald Reagan as an alien, and like had the hardest time giving me like a cool alien looking Ronald Reagan. And so, but it thought it was serving that up to me like on a silver platter over and over again. And for me, it just wasn't working, So so I'm frustrated with it, and it just has to keep pumping out that stuff, right, to try to get me to say yes. So I mean, how many interactions we're having with the phenomenon are maybe quite similar. It's just like this stilted conversation that isn't quite going anywhere, or they think they've got the message across and we've got it completely wrong. We're taking, I had this mystical experience with a phenomenon, and it told me that the end of the world is next week, and I need to start a group that's going to be doing this kind of thing. That's exactly what it means. Well, maybe that's not what it means at all. Maybe we got it completely wrong. And so it's just continually like beating its head against the wall to try to get humanity to understand. And maybe it's waiting for that moment where we finally get it right, where our models are in alignment with its intention.
Yeah, no, I think that makes so much sense. Like that one image that we were looking at where like it's a king, it's a priest, it's a bureaucrat, it's a mannequin at the store, like and that feels like what we do with contact experiences.
Hmm.
We redact them because of the stigma, or we reinterpret them based on whatever we're told in the media or whatever somebody else tells us, or because we're so lost that we're just any kind of an explanation people tend to just sort of like grab onto and be like, yes, that must be it. And you even see that in the community. I mean, not to this is listen, I don't know what's true and what's not, and I am not even trying to pretend that I do,
Yeah.
but I do find it to be a really interesting thing where people have these really intense experiences, these contact experiences, and then afterwards, um, they arrive at an answer very quickly, and then that's the answer, and
Hmm.
that's the only answer that they will entertain.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and yet there's probably so much more there that we don't understand. It's probably not a priest or a mannequin or a bureaucrat. It's somebody telling us that we need to pick up our trash and not nuke each other or something.
Right. Right. Yeah. That how often is our certitude just like completely wrong? And I think too, to religious experience and accounts of religious experience, that oftentimes the figures in those texts are having kind of inexplicable experience that they're doing their best to transcribe to whoever's willing to listen to them, and they're often seen as like kind of mad people, like they're consumed by whatever it was. But it's clear that they had some kind of powerful experience, maybe because they some weird thing accompanied them, or they were able to perform some sort of miracle. Whatever it is, it's they're able to convince others that this really in fact happened. And what the others often do is, because they haven't had the experience, they try to translate whatever they're hearing into something else, to in an attempt to kind of bring the experience back into their lived reality. And this is what like ritual behavior is intended to do. It's like like a software code that we're trying to run so that we can hopefully get this whatever it is that's interacting with us to do the same thing that it did for Crazy Joe back there who had that wild experience on the mountaintop. Um, and so this whole time we're just kind of doing these perfunctory things that really don't mean anything and aren't ever going to recreate whatever that experience was, because it was meant for that individual, not necessarily meant for all of us. Um, or maybe not. And it is quite. There are many implications to this. How we're going to incorporate these tools into our life, and how they're going to change the way that we think about ourselves and ultimate meaning, our societies. There will be no part of our lived experience that these kinds of things won't impact, in my opinion.
I agree. I think it's I feel like for probably it started, I think everybody started getting a little more cynical around like 2014, 2015, right? But
Hmm.
I feel like over the last 6 months or so I've started saying, what a time to be alive in a not sarcastic way, but
Hmm.
in a truly like, damn, this is a really cool time to be alive. And I don't know if we're about to go off the cliff into our oblivion, but like even that is terribly interesting.
Yeah,
Like it's all very
it's got to end somehow, right?
right. And I mean, I'm utterly fascinated by it. I've been really glad to have you to talk to about this because I don't think everybody totally gets it. But for those of us, it captures certain ones of us, and we're like, sorry, I gotta go commune with the AI gods.
Maybe that's for everyone else's benefit. We can kind of we find each other, we talk to each other, we don't rope the other folks into our madness.
Yeah, I'm sure my fiance thanks you for your service. So
Same with my wife. Yeah, yeah. So it's been a real pleasure going through this, and I agree with what you said earlier. I think we should do this again. We should. There are definitely others in our community, our circle of interest, that are using the tool. Be cool to invite them and kind of share their creations as well. Maybe even do some live sessions where we're kind of creating on the fly. That could be pretty interesting.
I'd love that. Yeah, let's do it. I
Awesome.
even if only 5 people are interested, I'm interested. So
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Kelly, thanks so much for this. I'm glad you said yes to the idea, and I can't wait to chat about it again.
yes, absolutely. I'll talk to you soon.
Alrighty.